Nessus and GFI LAN guard. Well, this video is going to be pretty simple. We're going to work with only two products here, Nessus and GFI LAN guard. Now, in the past, I've identified, a lot of different utilities and tools, and I've only spent a little bit of time on them. These are pretty full-featured products, however, and so I don't want to skim over them too much. They're really, really good tools for vulnerability testing, and they're definitely certified ethical hacker tools. Well, Nessus is primarily a Linux tool, but there's also ways of using it within Windows now. There's a couple of different ways. The daemon primarily still runs on Linux, but you can use clients for both Linux as well as Windows. And then there's a new item called Newt that you can run entirely on a Windows box. And then there's also GFI LAN guard. This is Windows software. And what I like about this one is it's extremely thorough, and most of the time, with some rare exceptions, will give you false positives, but most of the time it gives you excellent results in its reporting, very easy to read as well. Did you ever know somebody that just took forever to get to the point? I have a friend of mine. He kind of hem-haws a lot. He'll say, I don't know, maybe he's telling me he was going to the grocery store, and he'll say, I got in the car to go to the grocery store. Oh, you know what? That car, I need to get the oil changed on that. In any case, I pulled out into the intersection, and oh, you know what? They need to really put a stop sign back at that intersection. Some people have gotten in accidents there. So anyway, I decided to make a right turn. No, was it a right? No, it was a left turn. So, you just go on and on and on, and I just kind of, wait until he gets to the bottom line. Or usually I'll just say, come on, Jeremy, that's his name. Come on, Jeremy, just get to the bottom line already. We can talk to each other that way because we're friends. But, kind of is the same thing when it comes to hacking. I mean, we've been working with quite a few different tools and a few different methods here, and some of these tools, especially if you're just doing a penetration test, they're slow, if you're going to be careful anyway. You can't really run them as fast as you want to. You can't get to the bottom line. You can't find out exactly what ports are open, what vulnerabilities exist, and how to exploit them, like within minutes. Well, with vulnerability testing, it's a lot easier because you don't have to be quiet. I mean, you might be your own network administrator scanning your own network. And what we're going to see here is some tools that you would never use in a penetration test, but that you can use in a vulnerability test. And honestly, for the certified ethical hacker, they don't really make too much of a distinction. There's not a real big emphasis on being quiet. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of these tools. One of the tools that we'll be looking at here is a tool called Nessus. Now, I haven't shown you a lot of the websites to where you can get these tools and things, but Nessus is pretty dedicated to a specific site. And I'm going to go ahead and take you there so you can see where to get more about Nessus. So here's the website I wanted to tell you about. It's tenablesecurity.com. And from here we can download latest versions of Nessus and so forth. Now, a couple things I want to point out about Nessus. First of all, you can get a free version here, but you can also get a version that you have to purchase. The reason why there's a difference is because the free version will only scan a single network, whereas the one that you buy, you can scan multiple networks with that. It's a lot better tool for someone that's doing a penetration on a penetration test or a vuln test on a large-scale network. For me, for most of the time, I like to use the free version for two reasons. Number one, a lot of times I'm only going to work with one subnet at a time anyway, and if it's a white box test or even some gray box test, I'll be inside of their network anyhow, and I'll just do it from one network to the next. And the other reason is because I'm cheap and poor, both at the same time. What an unlikely combination, huh? In any case, if you do want to buy it, I'm not trying to sell the product to you. I'm just telling you that it is available, and I think you have to talk to them about how much the actual cost is. But I want to point out a few other things while we're on this page as well. In fact, there it is. Contact them for the pricing for all of these. But I do want to talk to you about a couple of things that are on this page. Number one is this Thunder product, just so you know. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but it's very useful for logging events on the network that are security related. There's also another one here, where I just saw it. The Newt, there it is. This is kind of a Nessus version for Windows. Typically, Nessus works on Linux and has two components, a server and a client. You can run both the server and the client on the same computer, and the server component does not have to be run on a server, quote unquote. That can be run on your laptop or something if you want. That's just what it's called. And the reason why it's run in that kind of a component is because you can run the server on one box and you can run clients throughout the network in the rest of the network, and they can all be doing different tasks at one time. It allows you to significantly expand the capability and speed with which Nessus works. In any case, the way that relates to Newt, I guess I went the long way around here. The way that relates to Newt is this is a new product that you can now run the whole thing from within Windows if you like the Windows interface better. There's also the Nessus server you can continue to run on Linux, and there's also another component now that I'll show you shortly here that you can run as the client on a Windows box. So That gives you, again, a little bit more flexibility. Server running, Nessus server running on Linux, Nessus client running on Windows. Now, one of the reasons why I'm going to show you Nessus here and a little bit more of the details with it is because it is a pretty critical tool, a very valuable tool as well. So we're going to get into a little bit more detail than some of the other little utilities and things that we've looked at in the past. Although I can't identify every single little checkbox and everything, we'll get a pretty good overview for Nessus right here. Now, what we're going to do is to change to the directory where I've installed it, and you'll do the same to wherever you decide to install yours. I just did mine in user local sbin. And then I'm going to go ahead and run Nessus. And Nessus, I'm getting tongue twisted here. Nessus D is the Nessus daemon to run in daemon mode with a -D there. And then an ampersand. The reason why I use an ampersand is because at the end of a command in Linux, if you don't put an ampersand in there, then the console will become unavailable while the process that you're launching is running. With an ampersand, it can launch that process and let it do its own thing, and then return the console to you so that it's still available. See, just like right here, I'm down at another command prompt here. Whereas if I had not put in the ampersand, then there would just be a flashing cursor, and I couldn't type anything or do anything. Now what I want to do is to confirm that it's running, so I'm going to do a PS to look at the process, and then I'm going to do a grep to search within the processes for a specific executable or specific program running called Nessus. And we do this, and sure enough, Nessus does appear to be running. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to run some components within Nessus, and again, I can't show you every checkbox and tab and so forth, but it is a pretty exhaustive tool, and it's a very good tool, so I'm going to do that from within Linux right here. Also notice, by the way, that my virtual machine, I kind of have to scroll up and down. I had to change the resolution here, and normally I wouldn't point that out, except to say that you'll see when I launch the GUI version of the Nessus client here that it's not very well sized, and it really overfills the screen, so it's difficult to work with unless I've got a larger resolution to work with, and that's why we're going to scroll up and down a little bit into this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just change directories to user local sbin, and that's just where I installed it. You can install it wherever it makes sense for you. And then I'm just going to run the command. That says D for the daemon component with a -D to run it in daemon mode, and then an ampersand, which allows me to release the console so that I can continue to type more commands in here if I want. Without the ampersand there, it will prevent me from being able to type any more in here. Now, we see that Nessus did start on process 2194, but let's just go ahead and confirm that anyway with checking our processes with PS and then a -A with a grep. Now, a grep is what we use to search for things. And in this case, we're looking for a process called Nessus within our processes, 2195. I guess that's actually where it is. And then what I want to do next is to run the client piece. Now, I can do that from my XP box if I've got the Windows version of that client. But since I'm already here in Linux, I'll just show you while I'm here. So I'm going to go ahead and run the client piece, and that'll just be, I got to change directories for that too, by the way. So I'll just go CD, where is it? Fine, I think is where I put it. And then I'll just do a Nessus, and then again an ampersand for the same reason I specified earlier. Now once I've done that, it opens up the Nessus console. For some reason I put it behind the window there. But anyway, here's the Nessus console. And you see this is why I changed the resolution here, because if I left it at the previous resolutions that I've been using, I can't access the login button. Even if I press tab and press enter, it doesn't seem to want to do anything with it. So anyway, here's the trainer account that I'm going to use to log on. Here's the host, just the local host. And here's the default port number within Nessus is 1241. You can change that if you want to later on. And then if you have a client piece that needs to connect to the Nessus server, you need to match the ports on both ends of the connection. And I'm going to go ahead and enter in a password. Oh, if I can remember it. What is my... Oh, here it is. And then I'll go ahead and log this piece in. All right, then the first thing it does once we log in is it takes us to the plugin tab here. And this is really where the power of Nessus is, because it can probe remote systems. And by the way, it does this without an agent. Some products, such as network management products of various types, require that you install an agent on each client that you want to scan. Well, if you're doing a vulnerability test, you don't want to install the client. You don't want to walk up to someone's computer and say, hey, let me put this agent on your computer so I can see that you're vulnerable to all kinds of attacks. Nobody wants to do that. So this does not use an agent. And it's pretty ingenious in the way it works, but it will use one of these plugins, or many of these plugins, to probe that remote system to see what kinds of vulnerabilities it has. Is it susceptible to some kind of a buffer overflow attack? Was it susceptible for the ability to gain root remotely? And then it shows you down here all the different kinds of things, the susceptibilities that could apply to one of those machines. You can see, Windows attacks down here. Plenty of those going around. So you can see there's all different kinds of things here. As well, remember, for example, we were able to use server message blocks at a previous point in time to enumerate the local users on that remote machine. Well, we were able to get a lot of information in a recent nugget when we looked at that at a previous time. So you can see where that's valuable. Then it gives you some information about it over here as well. So it's very, very useful information. And in fact, sometimes I'll even just go through here and read through some of these things without actually even running any scans, just to keep myself up to date on what's going on there. Also, another thing that's very useful is if you go to the Bug Track website, and note the spelling there, go to the Bug Track website, they have IDs and you can do searches against all of their vulnerabilities for these various types of problems. And while I'm here, let me point out a couple of other things. One of them, don't you just hate Gator? Have you ever worked with Gator? It's not really I guess it could open holes for certain kinds of spyware and things like that, and that's what a lot of people consider this, is to be some kind of spyware. But really, it's just a huge annoyance, so I want to try to get rid of that anywhere in my organization that I see it. And then there's a number of other things here. One of the things you'll see a lot of is buffer overruns in Windows Shell, and they're not all named this exact same thing, but there's a lot of exploits that allow you to do the same thing, where you'll do some kind of a buffer overrun and then launch a Windows Shell or a command prompt that allows you to, from that point, do just about whatever you want to. So that's a very common kind of a thing that you'll see there. In any case, a lot of different good stuff there. You see there's several other ones here as well. Backdoors, finger abuses, all different kinds of things that you can see here going on. One thing I want to point out here as well is that you can enable all of them or enable all but dangerous plugins. Well, what's that mean? Now, some of these plugins in probing against the destination machine might create a DOS attack or a denial of service attack just because some of the probes are a little bit aggressive, and it has to actually test to see whether the machine is vulnerable to something. And if it is, well, it might cause that vulnerability to happen, which sometimes is a denial of service attack. Now also you'll see a reference here to plugins. I mean, here's all my plugins and everything. That's kind of the power, like I said, of Nessus. And what can happen is when there are new vulnerabilities that come out, well, there's a new plugin that'll be written, and you can download that into Nessus here. One thing you can do is to just run that from the command line, and you can reach out over the internet if you have an internet connection and download all of those and then run your scans. Other things, and by the way, it's not all done by the people over that write Nessus and that work with Nessus. It can be a plugin that's written by any number of other developers that you can run and check out if you want. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at some other things here. And for that, we'll go to the Preferences tab where we can work with SNMP. We'll talk more about SNMP, or Simple Network Monitoring Protocol, a little bit later on, but the default community name is usually public, and if no one's changed that, then that's probably what you'll still see here. SNMP is a way of monitoring network equipment, and it sends information over the network so that you can monitor it all centrally. What's interesting here, however, is down at the bottom is in our Nmap section. Notice that we can do a lot of these kind of scans that I talked to you a couple of nuggets ago about when we were working with Nmap. Remember, the Connect scan is usually the most reliable, but it's also very easy to identify. So if we're looking for stealth, I wouldn't want to use Connect. But again, vulnerability test, stealth not the top priority. If I did need to use stealth, then I might go back down to a null scan here. So you see that Nmap gives you quite a few different options that you can choose from, and you can again choose all different kinds of ports that you want to scan against as well. Here I'm going to just do my scan in the insane mode. This relates to how aggressive the scan is going to be. If I'm really trying to stay under the radar, then I'll go down to like paranoid, but it will also take a long time to scan the network or even individual hosts. In fact, if I'm going to run it at paranoid, I'll probably just let it run overnight or something like that. As it is, even on the most aggressive modes there, it can still take a good while to run all of this. Let me go back to this in the TCP scanning technique. Remember earlier I mentioned that Connect scan is usually the most reliable way to go, but if you do have to scan through a firewall, and again, you can scan one subnet. It doesn't have to be your same subnet that you're on, but it can only be one subnet with the free downloadable version. Then through a firewall, I'll probably go to the SYN scan here. Another thing I would probably do is to deselect where I don't want to ping the remote host. So in other words, just make sure that this is deselected down here at the bottom part of this. Now here I'm really cramped with this dialog box. I had to drag this all the way to the top so that you can see all of this. But hey, you know what? I know what I'll do. I'll just go to full screen. Maybe that'll help out. So I'll go to full screen here. In any case, what I want to point out on this one is that, again, here it says also ping the remote host. Well, we don't really want to ping the remote host if we want to be able to make a connection to it. So I'll clear that checkbox. And again, also, nmap is the best way to go most of the time. Now, the makers of Nessus say that it's best not to use nmap. It's better to use their own. They have their own internal method for the scanning. But a lot of hackers just prefer to use nmap because they're used to it, and it really does well. So we select that checkbox anyway. If I can check it and leave it, there it goes. Then that's what we're going to go ahead and use. And once again, we are not using the ping the remote host there. Okay, let's go back up at the top here and go to target selection. Here's where we're actually going to specify the target. You can read from a file if you just type it in there, or if you create it with a spreadsheet and save it out to a text file or something like that. That's what I'll sometimes do. But in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and scan against a specific target. And the reason why I'm doing it against a specific target is because this can take quite a long time, and I know you don't want to wait here all day for it. So I'm just going to scan against this 10.10.10.42. Right now that machine is suspended. I'll bring it back online and then scan that target. So in any case, I'll go ahead and enter in the right IP address there, and then I'm also going to choose Perform a DNS Zone Transfer. Now, this is something that a lot of administrators, especially beginning administrators, naively allow. You should never allow DNS zone transfers to anybody that you don't want to allow to get all of your host records or all of your records of any kind out of your zone. And you see, a lot of administrators think, well, we don't want the service to shut down, and we don't want to not be able to do zone transfers to our servers, so I don't really know what they all are, what their all names are, what their IP addresses are. We'll just allow zone transfers to anybody. And that's a very insecure thing to do, especially in an Active Directory environment. So in any case, we'll talk more about that later on in this series, but I'll go ahead and give that a try here to at least attempt to do a DNS zone transfer. Now here I'm going to go ahead, and this is where I'm going to do weird stuff. I got to right-click on the title bar up there and choose Move to move it up enough so I can get to the buttons down here at the bottom. And then the dilemma there is going to be if I need to get up to the top again, I really can't because I can't access that title bar again. Probably somebody knows a keyboard shortcut that allow me to do this, but I don't know what it is. In any case, I'll go ahead and click Start the Scan, and we'll just let it do its thing here. We'll let it do its own scan and see what it can figure out about that destination. This does take a while, so I'll pause recording and come back to you when it's completed. All right, well, it looks like Nessus is done, and when it's completed, it issues an NG report, and we see the IP address of the client that we were scanning here. There's the subnet it was on. Here's the actual host. I guess I just need to click it once. And then it identifies what ports were open and whether or not there's something to be concerned about. The ones that obviously we need to be concerned about are whichever ones have the big exclamation point on them right there. This is where it's showing that it's running an application called VNC, and these two items right here. A VNC is a way of remotely controlling a computer. That's actually been installed on purpose in my case in advance because I want to show you how it can also reveal some vulnerabilities later on. A lot of administrators use VNC to be able to do something similar to terminal services or remote desktop, and they use them for assisting users in being able to do certain things. They'll be able to control the mouse and the keyboard remotely, and they'll be able to see what's going on that user's screen. Well, obviously, if someone hijacks that or uses it for malicious purposes, well, then they're going to be able to have total control of that computer. And here we've got VNC running on a pretty high-profile mail server and domain controller, so that's not necessarily a good thing in this case. And then I went ahead and skipped on down here to NetBIOS. Remember, this is running over UDP port 137. We saw that in our last nugget. And we have a security warning for this one as well. It was able to derive the following NetBIOS names from this server. And also, it's able to potentially exploit a vulnerability in which you can, and you can see the item right here, but you can potentially get sensitive information out of this server. So we see some things going on there. We see some other items here, security hole. This is where we could exploit the MS Blaster or something like that. So in any case, we've got all kinds of different vulnerabilities here that just goes on and on and on, all the different things that are wrong with this server. Now, one of the reasons why is because I've deliberately left some things open so that we would have something to work with. But there are a lot of administrators that just, quite frankly, even though they hear all of the warnings about security and everything, they just don't update their systems the way they should be. So as long as you get current up-to-date plugins using Nessus and you download the most recent ones, you're going to be able to get certain vulnerabilities against machines that haven't been rebooted in a long time and haven't installed the latest service packs and the latest updates. So that's how you run the server and client from within Linux. If you want to work with a Windows box for your client side of things, you can do that too. Remember I mentioned that there's a ceh-ep12.wmv file that you can download, and you can go to ceh-ep12.com to download that file. There's a link for it. Anyway, you just download it, and if you look inside of this zip file, it's not like a lot of other Windows applications. This one's actually a little bit closer, in some respects, to a Linux application. Notice that there's no setup.exe, there's no install.exe, there's no batch file or anything like that runs some kind of an install shield wizard and all of that. All you really do with this, and there's no instructions in this, you just have to kind of know what to do. And here's what you do. Just copy all of these files or extract all of these files to a directory of your choice. Now I've already done that, so I'm going to go to the appropriate folder here on my C drive, and I just dumped it into the temp directory where I now have all my Nessus files. Now, again, there's no setup.exe or anything like that. In this case, all you do is you simply double-click on the executable, bam, and it'll just launch, if I can click right, it'll just launch this Nessus console for us. Now, the way we actually get this started is we go to communications, and we need to make a connection. Because remember, this is just a client piece. Well, by definition, there has to be a server piece as well. That's what's left over on my Linux box. So I connect, and then I put in the IP address for that Linux box with the default port number. But you can change that at a later time if you want to be a little bit more obscure. One thing to be concerned about here, by the way, is that other people can hijack sessions or eavesdrop on these sessions, and you don't want them to eavesdrop on things like your password. Let me type that in, by the way. Your password or something like that, and you can save that password. You can also do authentication by certificate, and the encryption here is going to encrypt the data so that, again, someone cannot intercept it, because you can imagine this could be security-sensitive information. So what I'll do now is go ahead and click on Connect. Now, once you've done that, you go ahead and make your connection. Then it just flashed by real fast on the screen, and I had paused recording already. But it'll also tell you that it's downloading plugins. It downloads those plugins from the server. And again, keep those up to date as much as possible. Now what I want to do is to start a new session. I can go to the menu up here and choose New, or I can press the Insert key, or just use the toolbar up here. I'm going to click that to start a new session, and click on Create. And then your session gets started, and you need to identify your targets. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add here, and I'm going to enter in, you can see the self-explanatory target types up there, but I'm going to just enter in a range here. How about 10.10.10.40? I think I got something there through, let's just do 50. So I'll click OK here, and then we can also choose, again, additional options. These are very similar to the things we looked at earlier, just obviously the interface is a little bit different than what we saw before. You can do 16 simultaneous hosts, security checks per host, 10 simultaneous security checks per host, so you can kind of multi-thread this. It helps a little bit with performance. We saw an equivalent checkbox in the Linux version of this, which was to only run those plugins that were safe. Here we call it safe checks, and this again would help to prevent a denial of service attack against yourself. So you don't want to have that happen in any cases. And sometimes you might actually want to, but you might need to do it against machines that are representative of what else you have on the network to make sure that they're not going to cause a problem and be subject to denial of service attack. And you would do that then in a lab probably. Okay, then you can just do port scans as well. You can identify which ports you want. We'll just do the privileged ports. Or you could do well-known services, which includes privileged ports as well as a few others. We can also choose to ping the remote host. I'm going to disable that because, remember, a lot of your scans will stop cold if they don't respond to a ping. If there's a firewall involved, we're not going to want that. I'm going to enable Nmap. And you see there's a whole bunch of other different things that we can do here as well. Also, again, if we are concerned that we will be identified or that we'll be blocked by some kind of a intrusion detection system, we can disable to connect scans and instead use a SYN scan. So you see several of these different types of options. And that's pretty much it. This could take a while, so I'm probably going to pause recording after I click OK and it gets started here. But what we do here is we have our first session, and you can right-click on it then and choose Execute, or just press Enter. And then it's going to give us some options for how to execute the session. This middle option there, knowledge base identification information with each of the vulnerabilities it can find. It can also save the session itself. I'll just go ahead and check those. And then you can also do a detached scan. What that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and run the scan, and then you can see it's kind of grayed out right now, but then it'll email you with the information that it's received. I'm sitting here right now in front of it and live, so I'm not going to wait for the email. I'm just going to go ahead and click on Execute, and this is going to possibly take a good while, so I'll give it a little bit of time. One thing I will point out, though, is if you see that there's several hosts that appear to be dead or that you're not interested in, it's in your interest to go ahead and stop scanning on some of those hosts. So for example, if I know that there's no .50 in my network, I'll just stop testing on that host, and that'll help to reduce my list a little bit. I can also remove finished hosts from the list, and that helps me again to weed out what's going on here. While it's going on, especially if this has taken, quite a while or even hours, you can also click on Preview, and that gives you at least an idea for what you might see in the kind of results that it'll show you. And say, well, at least this gives me an idea of where I was headed, or an idea of what vulnerabilities are or are not there. And then you can just close this if you want to. But that's kind of gives you, I like that because it kind of gives you a running total, so to speak, as you go. All right, once the scan is done, you can see that we don't have anything left in the list. That's because I also selected this option, remove finished hosts from the list, and I removed also all of the hosts that weren't responding or that I knew weren't actually up. So really only probed a couple of IP addresses there. But in any case, go ahead and close that. Now I can see this report. What I can do with this then is to view the report and get some pretty interesting information out of this. First of all, let's take a look at this .41. This is one of my Microsoft servers. I don't remember actually which one this is. Let's see if it's in here somewhere. It's not one of these, but anyway, it's one of my Microsoft servers somewhere. And it's got, again, just kind of common things going on. It's got terminal services enabled, which is, it says medium severity. That could be that, I've got that secured in such a way that it's not really that vulnerable, but there are vulnerabilities with terminal services and remote desktop, just depending on which version of Windows you're running and which clients you're running. So it's a possibility. In this case, if I know that's pretty well locked down and it doesn't actually have the vulnerability it describes here, I can identify that as a false positive so that it doesn't, alarm me anymore. Then we have other servers here as well. Now this one, we see a lot of different stuff going on with this one. Look at this one. We did some queries against this one, and we find that, among other things, it's got certain advisories that are in place with this. It's got some serious problems there. And in this case, actually, this is also a false positive, because if this is your internal DNS server, it's not really an issue, and then you can mark that as a false positive. But if it's an external name server or remote name server, then it's going to allow for cache poisoning, which is where a hacker will be able to falsify a host record of some kind and then redirect your clients to one of their computers instead and potentially gather sensitive information from you. So just another thing to keep in mind. And we see some, a bunch of different other warnings that we get here. I'm not going to exhaust all of these, but you get the idea here. It's very, very good about identifying certain kinds of weaknesses that could be on that server. And here, oh boy, we've got a whole slew of them. And once again, this is a deliberately dumbed down version of Windows that I have not updated everything with, but which is not necessarily uncommon out in the field either. Now finally, let me also tell you about a product called GFI LANguard. Wow. I think this program is possibly one of the best vulnerability scanners I've ever seen, as if Nessus by itself wasn't enough. Now, Nessus is free. GFI LANguard, if you've got, I think, 512 hosts or something like that, I think it's about $2,500. Anything beyond that, that many IP addresses, you have to call sales to see how much it costs you. It's like one of those really expensive stores you go into is, if there's no price tag on anything, and if you have to ask how much it is, you can't afford it, right? Well, actually, even for this, GFI LANguard, a lot of these network scanning products and network management products are extremely expensive, in the tens of thousands, so I'd say this is actually still pretty reasonable when it comes to this kind of a product. And I'm not trying to sell this. GFI LANguard doesn't know who I am or anything. I'm just saying as my own personal experience, this is a really good product, and price per pound, you're getting an awful lot for the money with this one. So in any case, I'll go ahead and run a scan here. Let's just do 10.10.10.1 through 10.10.10.30. All right, and we'll go ahead and scan those particular hosts and see what kind of information we come up with. All right, I went ahead and let this scan run. Notice how fast this was. 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Now what we're going to really do here is kind of compare a little bit between this product and Nessus. Nessus is a great product, but man, I'll tell you, this one is an awful lot faster, and it's extremely thorough. It gives you great reporting. In fact, there's also reporting tools that you can get along with this to help organize all the reports, especially useful in a larger network. The key things I'm going to look at here, though, I'm going to expand this out a little bit, are these items right here where it identifies various vulnerabilities within each one of these hosts. Now, it looks like we've got some issues here with this one, for example. How about, a couple other things. Here's some things to keep in mind. This one says it's probably Unix. This is actually my router. It shows a couple of open TCP ports. It thinks it's a computer, apparently, but that's because it sees this MAC address here. But here it identifies it as Linksys router. This is one of those consumer level routers that we've got here. So we see a couple of those. Actually, I've got two of those here. These are actually different. They think these are probably going to think that these are also some kind of an item like that, but these, as they report here, are by Sonic Blue. Now, how does it know that this is a Sonic Blue MAC address? Because MAC addresses start, the first octets there start with vendor-specific and vendor-unique identification. So by just looking at the MAC address, this can scan it against a database of whoever owns this kind of a MAC address, and they know who it belongs to. So these actually, I probably watch too much TV. These are 3 Replay TV units that I've got in my house. And Replay TV is a lot like TiVo. You can record TV shows to a hard drive. Then this shows, oddly enough, and this is the first time I've seen this, this one here has a vulnerability that the other two don't. They're all the same unit, so I don't know what that's about. This could be a false positive or something like that. Ooh, it's got backdoors in it. And it's showing a deep throat backdoor on there. You know, that is a possible vulnerability with these TiVos and Replay TVs and things like that, because they're really unmonitored computers. They have a very basic operating system. For example, TiVo uses some version of Linux. It's a really scaled down version from what I understand. I don't have one, but that's what I've been told. And these products here also are just a very scaled down operating system, but it's proprietary. So this is probably a false positive in this case. And I decided to go offline just for a moment here and research this a little bit more. And this is another thing that we need to do when we see a potential vulnerability for 2 reasons. Number one, if it's one of your own computers, you want to make sure you lock it down. That's where I am right now. I don't want this Trojan on my systems. Number two, the other thing you'll want to do is if it's something you can take advantage of and you're scanning somebody else's systems, well, that's exactly what you're going to want to do. You want to take advantage of this against that other host. So a couple things I can do. I can run another scanning tool to confirm my results so that I can see whether or not this is a false positive. This scan did not see the same issues. It saw some other things, but it did not see anything about that kind of a backdoor Trojan. But to be fair, this product here probably would not identify it as specifically either. It would just identify the ports and any potential weaknesses that could be there and characteristics of the TCP/IP traffic going back and forth between this host and that one. So, might still not be able to rule this one out yet by looking at that one. What else could I do? I could go to research about that particular item, and I looked up certain Trojans here. And what we see with this one is this could not possibly be the exact Trojan anyway that it's identified by GFI LandGuard. Number one, because the system that it appears on is not a Windows operating system. However, this works within this registry key. If you're not familiar with this registry key, you should be, because this will always run at the startup of every Windows machine. Anything that's in this particular run key. Also, and here's a quick tip for you, by the way, as a hacker. Typically, hackers will, put their Trojans or whatever it is in this run key, but you don't have to just put it in this run key. In reality, this is where administrators are going to look first, and where antivirus software and anti-spyware software will look when it wants to see if there's some kind of Trojan running. Well, as a hacker, you can craft your own hacks, and you can put it in any run key anywhere in the registry. You can create your own run key in any path that you want in the registry, and it will still run when that computer starts up. So you're not limited to just this location. In any case, again, I'm not working with the Windows operating system here, so this could not apply. And it only works on Windows 95, 98, and NT anyway. And this is a proprietary operating system that just writes TV shows to the hard disk. So that's a little bit different that way. Also, by the way, I apologize for the profanity down here. As I mentioned way early in this whole series, there's a lot of profanity in hacking, and you kind of have to turn a blind eye to it or something like that if you want. And this is just showing us the default passwords for these servers for that particular Trojan. Another thing to consider here is, why does this scanning program think that Deep Throat is on there? Why am I getting this false positive? Well, it's because I opened up port 60,000 on that specific Replay TV device, because it transfers shows to and from other Replay TV devices throughout the internet. So we can, if I'm lost an episode of Lost, for example, or if I don't have an episode of Lost, then I can request it from another user, and they can send it to my system. Well, I have to open up a port in order for that to happen, and I just arbitrarily chose 60,000, not realizing that it was on the same port that Deep Throat likes to use. So, obviously a false positive. Now, another thing I like about this tool is that you can look for the scan filters. You can do a full report or just look for the most high security vulnerabilities that are found on the system, and you can probe these different ports again and identify what kinds of things it saw going on there. So, again, very useful information there. Easy to read reports, very clear, easy help system to work with as well, I might add. So, very, very good tools here, and you can use these kind of tools as well. Good product here with GFI LandGuard. In this nugget, we discussed Nessus and GFI LandGuard. Remember, with Nessus, there's a free version that you can a free version that you can get that'll scan a single network, but you can also pay for a version that scans multiple subnets if you want. In any case, even the single version is full feature and it works very well. The Daemon works on Linux boxes, but you can also get one now called Newt that works on Windows entirely. And there's also clients, one that works on a Linux box. There's two actually, a command line version, and there's also a GUI version, which is the one we saw. And then we saw the Windows version of this as well, the Windows client, and saw some results from it. Another very, very good program is something called GFI LandGuard, except for the trial version that you can download. I think it's good for 15 days. This is a pay product, but it's really a pretty good value, and the reporting on this is outstanding, and the scan results are outstanding as well. We saw that you can get a false positive. That's nothing against GFI LandGuard. Just so happens that I opened a port that's typically associated with a backdoor Trojan. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.